Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Rebecca Petris. She's an innovative, determined, high-energy patient advocate and educator. Once an aircraft finance specialist, she shifted into full-time work on behalf of people struggling with ocular surface diseases when her personal experiences convinced her of the unmet needs in this area. Rebecca works with patient communities to educate and empower people and form sustainable peer support systems. And she works on behalf of these communities to make patients' voices heard in research, in clinical care, in industry, and in government. What motivates her most powerfully is constantly seeing devastating mental health impact, the impact of chronic eye pain from a variety of causes. She is the co-founder and executive director of the Dry Eye Foundation. Please welcome, we're very proud to present Rebecca Petris.
Thank you so much, Charlene. It's such an honor to be asked to do this. I just really appreciate you and the BEBRF for all the work that you do. I think that the role that you play in research and all these different levels of patient support, it's so inspiring. You know, the Dry Eye Foundation is just a much younger, smaller organization, and these are just things that we aspire to really. So I had a chance to meet Charlene and catch up with what all their organization is doing at the American Academy of Optometry meeting in San Diego last fall, which was just great fun. So I live in Poulsbo, Washington, and as Charlene said, I'm a co-founder and current president of the Dry Eye Foundation, and I just spent a lot of years listening to stories of people who are struggling with any one of the number of things that fall into this miscellaneous bucket that we call dry eye. And when you listen long enough, you see patterns in people's experiences. What are they struggling with and why, and what things are helping them get better? We just have so much to learn from each other's experiences. We have collectively as a community this wealth of information. So today's talk is really for people who have what I think of as dry eye in capital letters, right? All caps, maybe. People for whom it's affected your life in some significant way. And if not necessarily right now, at least sometime in the past. We get several different types of challenges when we're struggling with dry eye of any kind. First and foremost, I always like to put this first because I think this is where it all starts, is the functional challenges, right? How do I manage comfort when I've got something going on in my eyes that's bothering me this much? How do I get through my ordinary daily activities? How do I get my day started if my lids are sticking to my eyes when I wake up in the morning? How do I feel good about myself? I can't wear makeup any longer because of dry eye. How do I drive myself to an eye doctor appointment an hour away when I can't keep my eyes open long enough? How do I concentrate on my work when using a computer bothers my eyes too much? How do I keep up some kind of social life when my eyes are pretty much done for the day at 5 p.m.? So just lots of practical challenges we struggle with. These are the sorts of things that drive us to the eye doctor in the first place. It's when it starts impacting our daily life. Then we got medical challenges. How do I find the right doctor? Somebody who understands and has something meaningful to offer. How do I get a detailed diagnosis? How do I get treatments that actually work? Is there such a thing? We may have financial challenges. The out-of-pocket costs of dry eye are a serious problem to a lot of people in our community. We've got all the OTC stuff to pay for. What is my insurance going to cover or not? And then, maybe even threats to income. How is this condition going to affect my work? Will I even be able to stay in my job? Will I have to retire early? Emotional challenges are the inevitable endpoint of a lot of this when you've got so many other things stacked up. I think it's really common in our community to get pretty isolated. Is there anybody else out there who actually understands what I'm going through? So a whole lot of factors then that just collide to produce a lot of stress in this situation. We've got everything from an innate fear of vision loss to complicated emotions when this whole problem maybe started for some of us with, say, an elective surgery on our lids or eyes. It's just a lot of things that contribute. So we got lots of big challenges. Before we get into those, I want to spend a few minutes just reframing how we think about this thing called dry eye in the first place. So a little sidebar. A lot of people that know me know that I really and truly hate and despise the term dry eye. It's inaccurate, it's trivializing, it's way too broad. It encompasses all kinds of totally different things, and it causes a lot of misunderstanding, whether it's in conversations with our eye doctors or trying to explain what's going on to a coworker or family or friends, and maybe most importantly, just in our own heads. Dry eye is not actually a single problem. I find it very important to divide it into these two things. On the one hand, ocular surface disease, and on the other hand, ocular surface pain. And this might sound a little too technical or something at first, but I believe that understanding the difference between these two is actually one of the most empowering things you can learn when it comes to navigating both the medical help that you may need and the day-to-day life challenges. So what does it actually mean? So ocular surface disease or diseases are all of these identifiable medical conditions that may be happening to the surface of your eyes. And my little list there is only a partial list. There's tons of things that fall into this category. You may have been diagnosed with one or more of those, or you may just have been diagnosed with dry eye, but these are some of the realities that are living under there. Ocular surface pain is all the symptoms, or most of the symptoms, that we experience as a result of ocular surface diseases, from the burning and stinging and grittiness to feeling like there's something in your eye, to soreness or heavy lids or watery eyes, any number of things. And we're all kind of different. We tend to have our own unique collection of these things. For one person, light sensitivity might be the ball game. It's everything that they're struggling with. For another person, it might be more that their vision's affected, but they're not in a lot of discomfort. But most people have at least a few of these discomfort symptoms. And I think we're not generally in our community used to using the word pain for any of this. We're used to using the word dryness. We're used to maybe using discomfort. But I want to read you a definition of pain from the experts. These folks I really love at the International Association for the Study of Pain. Here's what they call it: an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Okay, so for us, that would be an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with dry eye or anything in that left-hand box. So I think it's fair to say that everything under our ocular surface pain heading here is in that category. It's pretty unpleasant. So who are the experts on these two different things? Ocular surface disease, obviously the expert's going to be the doctor, not just any doctor, as most of us know. And we'll get into that later and talk about who the best doctors are for this. But they're the ones in charge of finding what is this disease, measuring it, and they quantify those things into some kinds of clinical signs. Is it going to be corneal staining or any number of test results? But when it comes to ocular surface pain, they're not the ones who decide what's wrong. That's all about us. We are the experts in what we're experiencing. And we can take what we're experiencing and quantify it into numbers, which is something I'm very fond of doing because sometimes it's of the most effective way to get a hearing for what matters to us if we can find a way to kind of put it into terms that our doctors better understand. But my point here is just that these two pieces are equal. The signs or the clinical signs of dry eye or ocular surface disease and the symptoms of them, they both matter just as much. So the problems come when they don't match. And I think a lot of us know that this is pretty common in the dry eye world. Ocular surface pain and ocular surface disease just don't track well together a lot of the time. My doctor's yardstick might be telling them something different than my yardstick is telling me about how bad this is. This is a classic problem in the dry eye world, and coming to terms with it really is one of the things I think our community struggles with most. So I made this little diagram to try to explain this a little better. So we've got an x-axis and a y-axis here, okay? Ocular surface disease is on the vertical axis. So the higher the dot up is up here, then the worse things look to the doctor. And we've got ocular surface pain on the horizontal axis. So the further you are to the right, the further you feel, the worse you feel. So we got a few extremes here. And that diagonal line is, where do these match? Do the signs and the symptoms ever actually match? Does the doctor think it's equally bad with how I think it is? So in our extreme ends, top left, that dot that's way high up there, but far over to the left, an anesthetic cornea. So somebody who has lost the sensation in their cornea, but their corneas really can be quite trashed, and yet they're not feeling anything. On the other hand, on the bottom right, that dot low down there, corneal neuralgia, where someone's in extreme pain, but if the doctor looks at them through the slit lamp, there's nothing to see. So we get this huge disconnect. Then at the top right, something like Stevens-Johnson syndrome, that's like the worst of all worlds. It looks really bad, is really bad, feels really bad, everything. So if you notice on this chart, I don't have very much up here where it kind of looks worse to the doctor. Down at the right, though, we've got a lot of dots where it's feeling worse to us, but it's not that high up there on the doctor's scale of, gosh, this looks bad, right? I think a lot of the dry eye world lives somewhere right in here, a lot of the chronic MGD and a lot of different situations, especially the ones where the eyelids are involved, things like lids that aren't closing or any kind of eyelid disorders that are affecting the tear film. They can get so uncomfortable or so painful in the extremes without necessarily causing a lot of cornea damage that worries the doctor. I think that understanding that difference can help sometimes to just take some of the frustration out of doctor appointments. I think it's just really important to understand that most doctors are oriented around vision preservation. If you do not have a disease that is threatening your vision or might one day threaten your vision, you're going to occupy a really different place in your doctor's mind than someone who does have a sight-threatening disease, unless they happen to be one of the few pain specialists in our dry eye world. So those mismatches can lead to just a lot of frustration and misunderstanding. You can have a doctor looking at somebody who's down here and they're saying, well, gosh, you know, this is really mild, nothing really to worry about here. And they think that they're giving you good news. But when you're really uncomfortable, like down here, and the doctor's saying there's nothing really wrong or not much, that is really confusing and stressful information, honestly. So being able to communicate about both pieces of this becomes really important. So how do you deal with these two things? Here's where part of the empowerment, I think, comes in, is looking at these as kind of a parallel track of addressing disease and addressing ocular surface pain. There's a lot of overlap, obviously, but on the medical side, you know, you've got a medical problem. Most people are going to use medical treatments to deal with it. The difficulty is, in our dry eye world, it can be difficult and take a really long time to get there, even just getting diagnosed properly. For some of us, it is a long, complicated path. And in the meantime, we're struggling with that practical impact of this stuff, of the ocular surface pain on our daily activities, right? So addressing the pain side really is a combination. It's not just about waiting for the medical treatments to kick in. It's about the practical strategies where we can kind of take the bull by the horns and find some ways to deal in the meantime. And that's an important part of what we're going to talk about today, because the practical strategies are not disease specific, and they tend to help a lot faster. And most of all, maybe they give you a sense of control, which can be really important when you're going through a hard time with your eyes. So we're going to start with the practical stuff and just addressing kind of those functional challenges we talked about. When we talk practical, I always like to think in terms of goal setting, right? This is not a flipping the switch of I have dry eye or I don't have dry eye, or I'm okay or I'm not okay. It's an incremental thing. It's about me figuring out what is it that I need to be able to do, or need to be able to do more of, or be able to do for longer, be able to do more comfortably, or do more comfortably for longer. So I think the top hit, one where everybody struggles that has dry eye, is computer use, right? Or at least it's pretty close to the top of the list for a lot of people. So these are some of my strategies. First of all, screen positioning. This is something I think that still gets overlooked a lot. When you are looking straight out or upwards, your lids are higher, you've got more exposed area, you're going to get more uncomfortable faster, you're going to lose more tears to evaporation faster. You want your screen lower, you want your gaze to be somewhat downwards if possible. I remember somebody in one of our Zoom support groups quite some time back was really clever with her workstation at home. She actually just went out, and she couldn't adjust the computer the way she wanted it. So she went out and got a tall stool and was looking down at it, and that was working well for her. There's things you can do on the computer, like adjusting brightness and color. I've got a couple of download references at the bottom right. Just Get Flux is a great little tool. I've used that for years. It can automatically adjust the lighting and the kind of warm or cool color and things on the screen. Blinkingmatters.com is, and it's not super sophisticated, but it's a wonderful little tool for both helping you remember to blink more at the computer, but it can also, if you let it connect to your camera, it can actually give you feedback on how much you're blinking. Excuse me. Desktop humidifier, I have one right over here. I have a, whoops, it's right behind my screen, but I have a tiny little hygrometer. You can get them for about $10 on Amazon. And I watch the humidity because I know when it goes below a certain level in my office. I mean, for everybody's different, but for me, the trigger point is about 40%. Below that, I know pretty soon I'm going to start getting uncomfortable. So I just keep ahead of it, switch that humidifier on when it gets down there. Protective glasses and goggles. That's for somebody who's very uncomfortable and is finding their work affected. That is always my very first go-to. Cover up, something that is going to keep out any drafts, but most importantly, help get the humidity inside right in front of your eyes to build up really high. So that picture in the top corner, that's a pair of Sienna eyewear. That's a company down in California. Their website is siennaeyewear.com. They're one of the few that's actually making something specifically for dry eye. They've got these various frames that have little silicone inserts, and those can be made into prescription glasses. Those, obviously, there's a big cost associated with things like that. People also get custom moisture chamber glasses made, especially if they have high prescriptions, but you don't have to spend a lot of money to get some protection over your eyes. You can get a $5 or $10 pair of safety goggles from the hardware store. Those will generally fit over your regular glasses or reading glasses, and they'll do the same function. I think the fancier ones, sometimes if you really need to get a good seal, or you want to be more aesthetically appropriate for, say, the workplace. Not everybody wants to be wearing goggles at work, for sure. Staying hydrated. I keep a pitcher of water at my desk. Redirecting or closing vents when possible, so you don't have too much air blowing around. And then drops. I think I have always appreciated advice from people who suggest that you try and keep up rather than catching up. got one regular in our one of our support groups that actually has a timer on her phone and just uses drops on a schedule. And I think it's so smart. So rather than waiting to feel the effects of extra dryness, just trying to keep ahead of it. That's computer stuff. Outdoors. This is Jewel, and this is one of my favorite pictures from dryeyestories.com, which is one of our Dry Foundation websites. She shared her story, long journey, and then about how she was able to get back to doing the things that she loved. And she's got kind of a modified hiking hat there and some moisture chamber glasses as well. Can't see which ones those are. There's a few different brands of glasses that people wear for outdoors. Some of the really popular ones are 7-Eye and Wiley X. Those tend to be in the kind of $100 to $200 range. And then, of course, more if you're getting prescriptions in them. But a cheap, really helpful one that I know a lot of people like are called guard dogs. They're like a big clunky motorcycle goggle, but oh my God, they just work so well. I've just known any number of people over the years who have put those on over their glasses to just take the dog for a walk or whatever. So anyway, outdoors, all about covering up. Then what about night times? That's one of the hardest times for a lot of people. Some people have symptoms mostly at night, especially if their lids aren't fully closing. This is where all the stuff tends to come in. I think of managing nighttime dry eye as a three-pronged thing or a three-step thing. First of all, taking care of the lids, however it is that you do that. So eyelid hygiene really is a must for people with any kind of dry eye. I mean, I think of it like brushing your teeth. And again, it doesn't have to be expensive, although these days I think we're really trying to steer people away from the traditional baby shampoo route for this, just because of how much more is known these days about how shampoos and soaps can actually damage the tear film. And, you know, it's like one step forward, one step backward. So using some kind of lid scrub product can be more helpful over the long term for that. Some of those are reasonably economical if you get like the liquids or the foams. There's all sorts of different types of those out there now. Some of the popular ones are, there's the hypochlorous acid ones like Avanova. There's the tea tree ones, quite a big range of those, and then more general purpose ones. A lot of the OcuSoft ones are general purpose, but there are other brands too. There's some very gentle like foams and gels and things. And there's a big variety in the wipes. Some of them are kind of harsher, papery ones, and others are some very soft materials. Then warm compresses, the brooder bags, or the tranquilized goggles, or any number of tools out there to do the warm compresses. My main comment on heat is really just know why you're using it. If it's a feel-good thing, great, do it. Otherwise, I would just defer to your doctor on it. If there isn't a compelling medical reason to use heat on your lids, then personally, I don't bother. But for some people, that can be a good setup for a better night. Then lube up. Whatever goop or drops or gel we're going to put in. There's a big variety of those out there. And I think my main comment on that would be, don't assume that thicker is better. I mean, most people with severe overnight dry eye do tend to go for the ointments. We don't all tolerate ointments the same. Gels sometimes can be friendlier. And sometimes just one of the better quality drops can be do a better job for people overnight. I'm one of the people who's kind of ointment intolerant, and I use drops plus a goggle or something rather than the greasier types. So then covering up. There's lots of really nice goggles and shields on the market, more and more of those now, a couple pictures of those in the bottom right cover. But there again, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get some protection overnight. Glad Press and Seal, or Cling and Seal, that one says, has been a favorite trick in the dry eye world for years and years, just cutting strips of it and patting it down over your eyes or using it to line a sleep mask. In some cases where there's just too much danger of damage to the cornea, our doctors want us taping the lids down, or some of us do that just purely for more comfort overnight. In that case, we always suggest that people use silicone tapes if possible. They just tend to be better tolerated than the plastic tapes and the paper tapes, although again, people's skin varies. This one that I've got a picture of down the corner, the Mepitech, that's my personal favorite. I have all of the goggles and gizmos and things, but I still sometimes go back to tape if I just want to be really, really secure overnight. So one thing that I hear from a lot of people is that they're just done early. It's like, Rebecca, once I get to 5 or 6 o'clock, there's none of me left. My eyes have just had it. And obviously that can just be really restrictive to what we may want to be doing with our lives. I think the dry eye veterans tend to find strategies to do some kind of a reset, at least once, maybe more during the day if they can. That might be something like a really nice steamy warm compress or a cold compress for pain. It might mean a nap. Sometimes there's just no substitute for closing your eyes. I think the veterans also become experts in how to budget their eye time, just like you would budget your money. So those are some examples of some of the practical side of dealing with dry eye. We're going to look now at the medical piece. This is my favorite one, not finding Dr. Right. So trying to find your way to the right doctor for dry eye is probably one of the things we get asked about most. And we don't have any magic lists at the Dry Eye Foundation. I mean, we know a lot of doctors, but it's not even as easy as just it being the best doctor in the area. There is no best, really. We have different needs. Some of us need a gentler doctor. Some of us want a just the facts doctor. We've just got different needs at different times, and sometimes needs for different types of specialists. But one of the key areas to differentiate here is types of doctors. So we've got optometrists, we've got ophthalmologists, and then we've got cornea specialist ophthalmologists. And those are kind of the three main ones that are going to be involved with somebody with dry eye. I put a little note at the bottom of this page saying there's no such thing as a dry eye specialist, because I so frequently get told when I'm on the phone with someone that my doctor's a dry eye specialist. And then I find that they don't actually know whether the doctor is an optometrist or an ophthalmologist or what actual training they had. So there really isn't any formal subspecialty called dry eye. Anybody can hang up a shingle and say, I am a dry eye specialist, okay? So it can be, that can be a self-designation, or it can be because that is what they've made their career focus. And I think all of these doctors have an important role in the dry eye world. I think we're going to tend to go to the cornea specialist ophthalmologist when we need a new diagnostic insight, when we really want to get to the bottom of something, when things aren't working. That's the next level up we go. I think there's a lot of really great optometrists out there managing dry eye. They may be more available to spend more time with us and do more patient education. Those things are important roles too. So in terms of finding them, one, I would say, don't believe Yelp. Okay, these aren't restaurants, they're doctors. Those reviews can be manipulated. What happens when you got a charming doctor who persuades all their favorite patients to write reviews and, you know, even threatens to sue people who post negative comments? Don't laugh too hard. These things actually do happen. Social media can, you'll find I have a lot of grudges against social media in the dry eye world, but it can be very helpful for identifying who are those better doctors in your local area. Tapping the nonprofits, BEBRF, us at the Dry Eye Foundation for recommendations, but also remembering there's no best ones. It's going to take some trial and error. And I encourage people to think in terms of their whole team, right? You may need more than one eye doctor, especially if there's eyelid stuff going on. Maybe you need the oculoplastics folks, the neuro folks sometimes. Then outside of the eye care world, I mean, I would want my PCP to know what's going on with my eyes, because they may know of other resources too, and all these other areas that overlap. A lot of dry eye is autoimmune, so rheumatology. Sometimes with these eyelid disorders, even some of the things stray into kind of dermatitis stuff where the dermatologist may be helpful. Last couple of notes about doctors preparing for appointments. I think I actually have a slide on this. Yes, I do. I like to encourage people to just set some kind of goal for the appointment. Know what you're going in there for, because you'll have a better idea of whether you got it or not if you knew specifically what you wanted to get out of that appointment. Love sending summaries to doctors beforehand. You want to make it really short, you know, a little bit of background, and then here's my top goal or goals for this appointment, and here's my top questions. And we can't send them a whole library full of questions. We know there's not going to be enough time in those appointments, so make it practical. But getting something visual in front of them before that appointment can really help focus a doctor's attention and maybe even walk in the door a little bit more prepared. I always like for people to use a symptom scorer before an appointment, and bring a copy so that it goes in your medical record. Here's my symptom severity. I want this on record. This is important information because that will help gauge whether a treatment is doing what you need it to do. Also encourage people, just sidestep those words dry eye, whether you're talking about the diagnosis side or your symptoms. Get specific on things and expect the doctor to, which is really the next topic, getting diagnosed. I'm not going to get into specific diagnostic tests or anything medical like that, really. I just have two messages about dry eye diagnosis. And one is, do not settle for the diagnosis of dry eye or dry eye disease or dry eye syndrome. It's just not enough. Being told by an eye specialist that you have dry eye, I would compare that to being told by a cardiologist that you have heart trouble. Okay, it's true, but it's just not informative enough. You expect to go away with more information than that. You want to get down to the detailed nitty-gritty. Second message about getting diagnosed is, it's not just like a dry eye type binary. People talk about aqueous deficient dry eye versus evaporative dry eye. Yes, that's important information too, but it's not just a one or the other. Most of us, I would say probably all of us, we're multifactorial. We've got more than one thing going on. Maybe we've got lower tier production. Maybe our meibomian glands are a little clogged. Maybe our lids don't quite close enough at night. Maybe there's a mild corneal dystrophy. Maybe there's a little ocular allergy. Maybe we've got some side effects from a drug or surgery. There's just a lot of nuance out there, and those are things you want to get into in the appointments. All right, then we've got the treatment world. And oh my gosh, so much stuff out there. I'd like to kind of put this all on one page just to get an idea of a little contextualization for dry eye treatments. First, in the kind of pale yellow down here, we've got the common stuff. What's the first line stuff that anybody goes to the doctor with some dry eye symptoms is likely to be advised to use or maybe handed to them? That's the OTC drops, the fish oils and whatnot, and the warm compresses and lid scrubs. Next level up in conventional treatment would be plugs and drugs. And then after that, for people with MGD, we've got all those fancy in-office treatments, the lipoflows and the IPLs and all that. And then we've got the kind of more advanced things that are really only for certain people. We've got scleral lenses and some special procedures. We'll get into those in a minute, and corneal neuralgia treatments. So let's drill into these a little bit. Whoops. Actually just going to talk through most of these. I don't have a lot of detailed slides on them, but talking about OTC drops, there are some pitfalls for people with dry eye here. When you go to the drugstore or you're browsing Amazon, which is really where it happens these days, we got lubricant drops and gels and ointments, we've got redness relievers, and we've got allergy drops. Those are kind of the main three classes out there. And there's some things to avoid. I would say number one, avoid the redness relievers. I know a lot of people like Lumify, and it's certainly a safer one than kind of the older school ones, but you want to take a look at those inactive ingredients because it's preserved with benzalkonium chloride. We call it BAC, not very affectionately. The BAC is the other thing that we want to avoid in all OTC drops if we possibly can, okay? There's still a lot of OTC drops out there, even some of the artificial tears, some of the like generic brand artificial tears are still preserved with BAC, and that's definitely step forward, 2 steps back as far as dry eye goes. Other tips on the OTC stuff, preservative free. I think most of us know that's where we want to be headed if possible. Preservative free, though, doesn't have to mean just the single-use twist-off vials. There are special preservative-free bottles now that have filters in them, so you can have a drop in a bottle without a preservative and have it still be safe as long as it's the right bottle. And a lot of the major brands are starting to go that direction now. One of my favorite things about those is, well, it's less waste, but it's also just more economical. You are going to get more uses out of one of those preservative-free multi-dose bottles. Last on drops, I bet a lot of you have seen on the news that there have been, there was one death and some people that lost their vision from an over-the-counter eye drop. There was a new warning just a couple of days ago from the FDA about an ointment made at the same manufacturing facility. That was a multi-state outbreak of some really serious infections that became systemic for some people. And it was shocking to a lot of people, but honestly, at the Dry Eye Foundation, it was not all that surprising to us because we have been seeing so many shady eye drop players coming on the market that don't necessarily know what they're doing safety-wise. We've been trying to warn people about that. A good resource for that is one of our new websites. It's eyedropsafety.org. Just a lot of information on how to tell the sheep from the goats, as it were. And one last tip there, which you'll also find on that site, is you want to be especially careful when you're shopping for drops on marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart. It's not that you can't shop safely there. You just need to pay attention to who you're buying from. You want to look on Amazon, always look to make sure you're getting it from the manufacturer. If you're looking for a Sustain eye drop, look for the Sustain store or where all of the Sustain brand is together, not some random third-party seller. There are a lot of fake and improperly packaged products floating around on those marketplaces. Okay, just briefly on some of these others. MGD home care, we talked a bit about compresses and scrubs already. Some people are doing that twice a day or however is recommended by your doctor. Let's see, nutraceuticals and diet and lifestyle. A lot of doctors recommend fish oil or some proprietary dry eye capsules. Anti-inflammatory diet is really big in the dry eye world, and with good reason. It doesn't necessarily solve things for all of us, but a good path to go down. You find lots of information about that online, and lots of doctors in their treatment plans for people also do recommend lifestyle tweaks, paying attention to humidity and practical care like the goggles and glasses. So next on kind of conventional treatment, plugs and cautery. Sometimes this becomes a box people check and move on really quickly from, but as with all things dry eye, there is nuance to this. There's different types of plugs, there's different sizes of plugs. Just because one kind didn't work doesn't mean none will work. There's silicone plugs, there's dissolvable plugs, there's solid plugs, there's flow controller plugs. So like if you can't seem to get a balance between not enough tears and too many tears, there's ways to strike a balance with combinations of those types. There's different companies and different sizes. So I just encourage people, if they've had an unsuccessful experience with plugs, to just explore some of the detail of that with their doctors a little more before giving it up entirely. Then we get prescription therapeutics. Conventional part of that would be, I mean, the dry eye drugs that are on the market. We all know about Restasis. It's been 20 years now. We've got Xiidra as well, which works quite well for quite a few people. I'd say Cequa is like a higher concentration of what's in Restasis. Then the newest one specifically for dry eye is Tyrvaya, the spray. And we've had been hearing a lot of good experiences from our community on that. That's the nasal spray. A resource for that is dryeyezone.com. We've got a list of kind of anything FDA approved in that area. So that's 4 dry eye drugs. That number might actually double by the end of this year. There are 4 different companies that have filed NDAs for drugs related to dry eye. One of those is for Demodex blepharitis, and those could be, some of those at least could be on the market as early as the end of this year. Other stuff that's in the prescription category, we've got a few oddball things like Lacrozert, which is so often unavailable. I think it's supposed to come back around the end of this year or early next year. Some of you will know what I'm talking about. That's been for some people, it's been kind of their game changer. Then we've got compounded drugs. Sometimes you need, say, a steroid drop or something, but you can't tolerate the preservatives, so we can get preservative-free versions of them compounded. There's other specialty products kicking around. There's the blood products, autologous serum, which I've been really happy to see that pick up as much steam as it has in recent years. In-office MGD treatments, then I think those are fairly well known. Lipiflow, IPL is getting a lot of attention because of a recent FDA approval. Then there's others like Tear Care and iLux. There's meibomian gland probing, Blefx, in-office expression, a lot of those. The downside with those is you're basically going to be cash pay on vast majority of that. Then just really briefly, scleral lenses. A lot of people know I've worn scleral lenses myself for both vision and dry eye and pain reasons since 2006. So I've always been a big advocate for that for the right people. There are some procedures or surgeries that are helpful for some people depending on their situation. That would be anything from like eyelid interventions for some reshaping to sometimes in severe cases, sewing a lid partly closed like a tarsorrhaphy. There's treatments for let's see, thinking of conjunctival chalasis surgery would be another example where they're doing some smoothing to the conjunctiva, which is sometimes helpful for people with some types of dry eye. And amniotic membrane treatments, probably some of you are familiar with, where they use almost like a contact lens made of amniotic membrane to help heal the corneal surface. And then down in the corner, corneal neuralgia treatments for people who've got the extreme types of pain. Just wanted to share some resources that we have on eye drops. On dryeyezone.com, we've got a list that compares all the different OTC drops. So if you've got something you don't like and want to avoid more of the same when you're trying other types, it's easy to find. Just search by active and inactive ingredient. We've got the approved drugs list and the active pipeline now, and then also our eyedropsafety.org list site right there. Some last thoughts just about trying new medical things, not necessarily new things, but new to you things. Are we following a plan with a purpose, or are we treating dry eye treatments as the lunch buffet and what's next and what's new out there that I could try? I always like to have a rationale and remember that treatment should follow diagnosis. It's not just a bunch of undifferentiated stuff. It should be focused on something that's actually specifically relevant to your diagnosis. What's your yardstick? Which problem are we trying to solve? If it's a medical problem that has vision implications. For example, the doctor's going to be setting a goal there for where they want you to be and how they want that to improve. But if it's all about us, ocular surface pain and comfort, then our yardstick is our own experience. And I encourage people always to document that with a symptom questionnaire like the OSD. Being methodical. I think when we get frustrated with lack of progress, we start churning through treatments too quickly. We have to give things time, and we have to try things, not 5 at a time. We'll never know what's working if we do that. Working with your doctor to set a reasonable trial period for something new, a trial period that accomplishes what the doctor wants to, but something that we can live with as well. Using those comfort tools to help in the meantime. This is where the dry eye glasses come in handy. Get yourself more comfortable with tools like that while you're waiting for a slow drug to kick in. And then safety first. The Esri Care situation in the news has taught us that it is definitely no longer safe to assume that the worst that can happen with an eye drop is that it just doesn't work. No, the worst that can happen is that it harms you. So we want to know what the safe things are and discuss eye drops with our doctors. All right, then briefly, the financial side of this, big part of the dry eye world, right? Our over-the-counter costs can really get outrageous. So how do we keep that within bounds that we can live with, right? Especially right now with that Esri Care situation, I'm cautioning people more and more to be careful with generics and knowing where things come from. But those brand names then are more expensive. As I said before, I like the preservative-free multi-dose bottles because those are going to last longer for you and give some cost savings. Eyelid care, these things are all out of pocket as well. We can shop around, find some of the less expensive brands. Compresses, goggles, dry eye glasses, there's things on the expensive end if we're a dry eye connoisseur, but there's also cheap ways to do stuff too. We're always happy at the Dry Eye Foundation trying to help people find what those cost-effective means are. Prescription drug costs, hearing a lot from people where their copays are just way beyond what they can afford. You want to always try to tap into everything the manufacturer has to offer. They all have pages with information about that. In-office procedures, that's a trouble spot. They are really costly. We're working with 1 or 2 of the companies that have those to try and see what steps they're going to take to try to blaze some trails to get some insurance coverage for those. Scleral lenses and supplies for the lenses themselves, that can be a big out-of-pocket cost. And sometimes we have to fight really hard. So this is true with some of the drugs as well. We have to fight with those insurers to get what we need. Another financial problem is not so much the cost of treatment as, am I going to have the money to afford it? We did this survey a couple of years back, lots of people in it. Some of the numbers that came out of this survey shocked us. Of all of the people in that survey that work, we had 50% saying they needed some kind of accommodation at work. Fine, good, lots more employers are giving that to us than used to. 46% missed work at times when symptoms were bad. 25% missed an unusual amount of work to get to their appointments. 61% said they experienced reduced productivity and success. That's a stress driver, right? If we feel we are not at our best at work, that's going to be giving us concerns about the future. 14% had to leave a job because of dry eye. I'm one of the 14%. That was almost 20 years ago now. 10% short-term disability, 5% long-term disability. So these are real concerns and reasons to get ahead of the situation and be talking with our employers about our needs early on. Emotional challenges, this is the big whammy. I think that we have to acknowledge the emotional burden of ocular surface disease and ocular surface pain. It doesn't affect us all the same way, but it sure does affect us. For a lot of us, this can mess with our heads in some pretty troubling ways, especially if we if it's coming in ways that we've maybe never experienced from other causes, it's something that I hear often from the community. It's like, Rebecca, I've been through this and this and this and this, and I came through it fine. How is it possible that this thing called dry eye could take me down like this? I've never experienced this before. It's scary for people. And when you're stressed and uncomfortable, in addition to just the hardness of going through that, it also is going to impact how well you can make good medical decisions. It's going to impact your compliance with treatment plans. It's going to impact your ability to navigate everything else. So it's just important to acknowledge this and find the ways to get ahead of it. This is a giant sticky note on my wall right over there. It's just a little way we, for our community, kind of summarized what this thing is that we're struggling with, why there's an emotional impact from this. And it starts with having a real problem. Our eyes are uncomfortable. It's affecting our lives. Nobody seems to understand. It doesn't seem to make sense that dry eye could do this, right? So we take steps to solve it. We do all the right things. We go to the doctor. We try stuff, rinse, repeat, over and over. And we find that it's hard and it takes a long time to get solutions. Hard to find doctors that really know and can help. Things don't work the way we expect them to. And on top of it, dry eye just is this inherently trivializing thing. And in the meantime, as we're trying all these things, we're maybe continuing to experience some losses, things that we love that we're not able to do any longer. Relationships can be impacted. All of this then leaves us confused and anxious and discouraged. It can undermine our confidence in ourselves and in our doctors. We get this long and growing list of things to worry about, and we churn through one treatment after another, maybe even 3 at a time. We can get into a really painful spiral towards hopelessness. This is my big message for that dilemma, that we reach that place that we get to. It is all about getting connected. I find it heartbreaking over and over and over to talk with people where I am the first person they've ever talked with who had any idea what they were talking about or what they experienced. And I love being that person for them, but it is heartbreaking to me that they went on so long without someone to talk to who actually got it, without getting more connected to a community. We have a universal need, right, to be seen and heard and understood in these hard places. We do that differently. Being seen for me may be a different thing than it is for you, but it is a need. I think that the isolation in this is the worst of it for us. The longer you're alone with it, the more you get stuck. My first message on how to get connected is how not to get connected. Nothing against Facebook, but boy, when you're struggling, there is no worse place than a dry eye group. And I say this as someone who hosts dry eye groups, right? It's when you go in there and you're already under stress, first of all, it's tunnel vision. You're only going to see the people that are having a hard time too. And those are self-selecting groups. The people who are struggling are the ones that are gathered there for the most part. Thankfully, there are some people, we've got veterans that have kind of, hung out for a long time trying to reach back and help others. But it is going to feel like this overwhelming group of all these people who aren't getting better. Therefore, this thing is never going to get better. I'm never going to get better. And then down you go. So I just say, stay away from social media when you're having a hard time. You want to get connected with real people somehow. As I said, we all do that differently. We here at the Dry Eye Foundation, we hear from a lot of people who go back and watch our dry eye happy hour sessions. These where they're hearing people's stories online, or they read one of the dry stories at drystories.com. The BEBRF has stories on their site, and they've got webinars and things. So sometimes just hearing from people who have struggled with this is connecting for people. Then, do you feel comfortable getting in a group. I love the Zoom groups. Not everybody's ready for something like that. One-on-one calls are good. As you heard Charlene say, that they're talking with people on the phone, they're doing counseling. We have a helpline. One way or other, however you do it, just make sure to reach out. Don't stay alone with dry eye. And I apparently didn't make a last page, but that is my last page, Charlene. So I'm going to pull this down.
Hi, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, we have some questions. Please be sure if you have some questions to put them on the Q&A. I see we already have 12 listed there. So if you don't mind, Rebecca, I'll pull them up and read them so that you can answer them.
Right. And I just remembered you had sent a couple to me some weeks ago too. And I've got those written down here somewhere too. I will pull them up.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What is the name of the eyewear place in California you mentioned?
Right. So that's, and I'm going to put this in the chat too. It's 7eye.com. If that was about the moisture chamber glasses.
Yeah.
Okay, so 7eye.com, they make two different brands. One is the 7-Eye Air Shields. Those are the ones that are like sunglasses with a removable foam gasket, so you can get completely closed in. And one of the things I particularly like with those, there's also a similar brand, by the way, called Wiley X. If you have severe light sensitivity, those keep you protected all the way around, because sometimes with light sensitivity, sunglasses aren't enough. It's the peripheral light that can hurt even more. So having those dark foam shields right to the skin can, for people, I've known a lot of people who have been basically housebound by dry eye because of light sensitivity, and those can do a lot. But just for casual use for dry eye too, just outdoor protection, those are great. The other one is Sienna eyewear. So this is actually a 7-Eye brand, but those are the ones that are more for they're just more like regular glasses with the little silicone shields around them, something you can wear to work without feeling ridiculous.
Okay, and are you saying 7-Eye, like the number 7-Eye? Yes,
sorry, I just realized I was posting these in the wrong place on the chat. I'm going to put this in 7eye.com.
7-Eye.
Eyewear.com. And wileyx.com. And another one that I mentioned, one of the kind of lower cost ones, is Guard Dogs. They have these products called Evaders that, like I said, they're like motorcycle goggles, but boy, have I known a lot of people who love those over the years. Those are like $35 to $40 versus the 150 plus typically for the others.
Okay, next question. My eyes are alternatively very dry or dripping tears. Is this common? How can I manage it?
Is it common? To some extent, yes. So a couple of different things come to mind with that. I mean, it depends on the reason for the tearing. So extra tearing, if those are reflex tears because of dryness, then that's just watery eyes are a dry eye symptom, right? Your surface is dry and irritated, so it's sending those messages to the brain saying, make more tears to wash the dirt out of my eye, even though there's no dirt in your eye. So if it's because of dry eye getting worse and that's causing the tearing, then I think that's a trip back to the doctor or maybe another specialist to see what can be done to improve the tear film itself so that it's not causing the over tearing. But the other thing I think of with a lot of over tearing is just making sure they check out your tear drains, because it's possible for those to become blocked and then you're over tearing just because excess tears don't have anywhere to go. So just kind of more questions for the doctor.
Okay. Dry eye is absolutely the worst of this disease. When I use Xiidra, I get pain in and behind my eye. Anyone ever experienced something like this? My eye pressure checks okay. I've tried other drops and no problems, except relief goes away soon after applying. Just thought I'd share my recurring experience.
Right. So pain in and behind the eye. I feel like I've heard from somebody who had that kind of pain behind the eye thing. I think one of the really helpful places to go for information on this, I love looking up the FDA approval data for a dry eye drug. There you learn all kinds of things, including like how many people did it actually help, because the percentages are actually fairly small, right? But you also see the lists of what other things people experience, because those original clinical trials, there's hundreds and hundreds of patients, so most weird things that might happen have come up during those. If it's a fairly brief thing or something that resolves within half an hour, if you haven't already, I would suggest using an artificial tear 15 minutes before a prescription drug. People do this with Restasis and Cequa too all the time, because some of these drugs are just really irritating, and that irritation can trigger like almost referred pain around the eyes. So using an artificial tear first can kind of help buffer that. If it's something that's lasting a lot longer than that, that's a conversation with the doctor. Is this something that's going to be appropriate for me? Then it's, maybe that balance of, is it giving me enough clinical improvement that there's a compelling reason to stay on it and to suck it up with the side effects? Or if it's not demonstrating clear enough improvement, is it time to move on to a different type of therapeutic?
Okay. A friend is allergic to sulfa, and we noticed that OcuSoft has a derivative. Do you have suggestions?
OcuSoft has a derivative, so I'm not
quite sure.
to understand that question.
Cynthia, could you please clarify what you're asking, meaning by OcuSoft has a derivative? And if so, we'll catch it in a bit.
I'm just looking up. We have a page somewhere that's got like an ingredient reference guide for lid hygiene products to compare things. So I'm just going to look at some of them. Also, feel free to just reach out to me direct about that. Love to sort through like ingredient issues and finding things. So an email address is info@dryeyefoundation.org. Definitely love to help trying to find things that do not have ingredients that cause issues.
Okay. Is extreme dry eye often a precursor to blepharospasm, as mine seems to have been? I can jump on this one, Rebecca, unless you have some thoughts on it.
You know tons more than me about it. I would only say that's.
Well, I will say,
I know people in that situation in our community.
There are a large number of people who have dry eye that does develop into blepharospasm. It is not the cause of the blepharospasm, but it is often the trigger for the blepharospasm. The cause of it is undetermined, and it's probably some genetic predisposition, but the dry eye might trigger the blepharospasm. So I think that pretty much answers the question.
Absolutely. The difference between causes and triggers is for everything is always really interesting.
Right. Can I get a recording of this presentation? Absolutely, you can. We are recording it. It will go through an editing process, and then we'll post it on our website. Dry eye is not an adequate description. What about SICA?
Like Zika syndrome, right? Keratoconjunctivitis Zika. That's kind of the. Put this in the chat here. Zika syndrome. Yeah, those are good terms for it. That is still specifically relating to dryness. I would think of that as connected to a lack of tear production. And bear in mind, not a doctor, no medical background. I'm coming from a place of just, somebody who works in the community here, right? One of the reasons that I object to the term dry eye, or that I also would feel that Zika is a little too narrow for it, is there's so many different types of things that come into play here. So for example, someone can have perfect tear production, but if their eyelids don't close, they're still going to struggle with the surface getting too dry simply because of the eyelid dysfunction. Yeah, just a lot of different scenarios.
What is the eye drop ingredient she said to avoid abbreviated BAC back?
Right, I'm typing it in here. Benzalkonium chloride. Do you mind just that? What was that previous question? I had a thought briefly and then it escaped me.
The one that was incomplete?
Yeah.
Severe eye dryness can lead to involuntary eye closing, thus cannot, and just the letter B.
And maybe that was about just things somebody can't do because their eyelids are closing involuntarily. I can't guess entirely what that's all about or what their situation is, but I will say that, I'm always preaching the gospel of moisture chamber glasses, right? That is yet another situation where I think it can be helpful. I'm thinking of like people who are unable to drive as far as they need to because their eyes are closing. And if that's closing involuntarily because of the dryness and discomfort, then having that kind of protection around your eyes can make all the difference to just keeping them open longer, kind of combination of lubrication and eye protection.
Okay. She's dropping names of things people will have trouble remembering. For example, I think this is the same thing, Matt. Ingredients. Hope we'll have an explanatory list by the end. And I think that we could put something together and add that to the end of the video if we need to.
I will, and I apologize. I had so many more things I wanted to put in print on the presentation, and I just did not allow enough time to figure out if it was going to run too long. So I ended up just doing a lot of that.
That's okay. No worries. This has been so great. You have no idea. I think we got the rest of that that question. Severe eye dryness can lead to involuntary eye closing. Thus, can blepharospasm be wrongly diagnosed in patients with dry eyes? I suppose it could, but I don't think just the eye closing is what they use. What do you think?
I guess not an expert. Just in my little world, I think of blepharospasm as one of several things where figuring out what's the chicken and what's the egg really can be complicated. And it's like, in that situation, I want the eyelid expert and the cornea expert, the tear film expert, to be talking to each other over coffee or something to be helping to sort that out.
Okay, good. What brand of omega-3 do you recommend, or what are the important factors? For example, flaxseed oil versus fish oil, etc.
I don't. I sidestep that one because I don't know, nutraceuticals are the one thing I've just never been able to particularly wrap my brain around. There were two great big, really well-funded studies in the last several years, the DREAM study, and I forget what the other one was, but these were NIH-funded studies put on for like a year. And at the end of the day, they said no better than placebo. And I had to really scratch my head pretty hard over that. I know that omega-3s and fish oils in particular have been recommended for dry eye commonly for the last 20 years, ever since the tuna study from the women's health thing. But yet the medical evidence is kind of wishy-washy, and I've never been able to wrap my brain around the differences between different things. The closest I can get, just purely practical, I just don't have the technical knowledge of this, is I think whichever thing you tolerate best. I mean, some people don't tolerate fish oils, right? Flaxseed oil, fish oil, some other kind of oil. If it's good for general health, why not use it? And if you get a bump in your dry eye, great. But I do think of it as like an potential incremental improvement rather than a kind of a key part of treatment. Saying that at the risk of contradicting many doctors, so my apologies.
Does cataract surgery affect dry eye?
Yeah. And 20 years ago, when I talked to people that were having trouble after cataract surgery, nobody was talking about it and nobody was recognizing it, right? But today, ophthalmologists are definitely recognizing much more that this is an issue. A lot of them are getting ahead of it. One of the things I'm seeing at the medical conferences is they're doing a lot more presentations to their peers saying, here's how to pre-treat dry eye before you get anywhere near cataract surgery. So hearing that more from the community now too, that they're tending to get ahead of it. Even some of the intraocular lens manufacturers are getting involved in that world by making their own eye drops and things that they distribute with those lenses to try to get doctors to pay more attention to dry eye, because it can affect people's visual outcomes too.
Okay.
And hopefully it's mostly going to go away pretty quickly afterwards, right? But that's not going to be true for everyone. And people with severe dry eye going into cataract surgery, may need extra treatment and things before they do it.
Okay. I suppose this is supposed to be massage. What about lid massage?
Lid massage. Yep. I'm sure there's probably some decent YouTube videos and things that show methods for this. I would always say, probably if you want to do it, get your doctor to show you a safe method for it. So that would be basically you do like a warm compress, and then you've got some method of kind of pressing on the bases of your meibomian glands to just help push out any stiffened oil in there. And some people have those hard caps on there where there is simply no safe way to do that at home. So again, your doctor's going to be the best resource to know, is this a suitable thing for me? Is it a helpful thing for me? Is it a safe thing for me? And if you go to a YouTube thing, maybe clear it with your doctor too, because there's some scary stuff out there. I mean, I've seen people with like forceps sticking them under their glands and squeezing and just doing all kinds of nasty things. Some doctor guidance is a good thing.
Okay. Do you have any information and dry eye, of dry eye being hormonal related? Any possible solution using hormones?
It absolutely has huge connection to hormones. And I mean, going way back when dry eye was seen mostly as a menopausal women's disease, right? But there's been a ton of research in that. And the research I'm about to give is an extremely technical one, but it's a good source of the right people for this too. There's in the TFOS DUCE 2 project, which was back in 2017, they published this enormous report of kind of the state of the dry eye universe. What do we know? Where is science at with dry eye, right? They had it divided into all these different reports, and one of those was specifically on hormones. Bear with me, because I just looked this up for somebody the other day. TFOS DUCE. I'll get it and I'll add it. If we put together a list afterwards, I'll add it to that. It's like the sex hormones and something sub-report. I can't quite remember the full name. Oh, here it is. Sex, gender, hormone. That's it. TFOS, so I'll put it in the chat.
Can we get a copy of your documenting worksheet for symptoms?
So I'm going to give you the copy of it that we have on the Dry Eye Zone, but there's actually a smartphone app for this too. I'm putting this in the chat now. The smartphone app I really like. It's actually really easy to take, and it creates the score, but it can let you email the results to yourself. You can email them direct to your doctor out of the app, and it will track your scores over time. So if you just search on dry eye OSD in an app store, it should bring that up. Okay. There are other types. There's like the speed. I think people who have had lipoflow, usually they get them to do the speeds questionnaire. So this is a symptom questionnaire, right? So your score, you're answering some questions about symptoms, and it's spitting out some kind of number or score. I like OSD best. I feel that it really captures the environmental aspect of dry eye experiences well, and how our environment helps us. But they're all good, and these ones are all scientifically validated. So this is not just answering questions. These are things that have been through the ringer. They've used these in clinical trials for drugs. They're very well accepted tools. It's like the pain score, forget the name of it. but for pain generally.
Mhm. I would like to know whether anyone has ever been harmed by meibomian duct probes. That does not come up on my research. My doctor charges $2,500 per eye, but it includes the LipiFlow immediately after probe. How many have done this and how many were meaningfully improved by this?
I don't have data on efficacy at my fingertips. Happy to follow up on this. Again, email me any more questions like this on info@dryefoundation.org. I'll put this in here as well. Has anybody been harmed? Yes. Are there documented reports of people being harmed? I don't know off the top of my head whether there's any case reports in the literature. I can definitely find out. I'm just going by patient reports because I've been kind of following this ever since probing got started.
Okay. It says the chat's disabled. I think I just clicked it back on. I am guessing it is not a good idea to put the single dose eye drops into a larger bottle, so I do not weigh.
Absolutely. Please do not transfer stuff from one container to another. I want to share a little resource here. Can everybody see the chat? I've been typing stuff into it for a little while. I hope they can get at it. So I just posted a link to just kind of some guidance on bottles and vials, but here's also posting a link now to a video about how easily stuff gets contaminated. And this is specifically one about like how stuff gets sucked back into a bottle, but I think it's kind of revealing. With the EsriCare situation, those drops that have been recalled, we still don't have the final word. We don't know. We've been assuming they got contaminated at the factory, but we don't actually know. I understand there were some unopened bottles that they tested that weren't contaminated. But when you've got anything that does not have a preservative in it, does not take a lot to contaminate that. There's a reason that they put them in single-use vials. If you're wanting to transfer something from a vial to a bottle, buy the preservative-free type of bottle, the ones with the special caps on them. That first link that I posted to Eye Drops and Preservatives, it has some pictures of what those types of bottles are.
How is blepharospasm different from dry eye, and how do you tell the difference between the two, Botox or not? Well, as we have learned today, dry eye is an ocular surface disease. Blepharospasm is a neurological disease where there's a misfire in the brain to the nerves in the muscles around the eyes, causing them to spasm, blink, or just simply close and not be able to reopen them. So it's not, dry eye is often just something that accompanies blepharospasm, but not everyone who has blepharospasm suffers from dry eye. Does that make sense? And certainly not everyone who has dry eye gets blepharospasm.
It's like, in medical terms, are they like comorbidities, or is there some cause and effect going on, right? So many of us have more than one thing going on, and it's just hard to understand the relationships between.
Well, it's explained to me that one of the reasons that people with blepharospasm acquire dry eye is because the natural tear flow over the eye is from the upper outer top diagonally down. That's the direction of the natural blink, is this diagonal line right here. But when you have blepharospasm, it alters that so that now you are blinking horizontally. So you have actually interrupted the natural tear flow by virtue of not having that diagonal push of the flow of the surface materials into the tear duct. So that's how it was explained to me.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I re-put the chat up, so I'm hoping that you can see that. If not, I'll try and save it and post it on Facebook or on a website. Is Retain MGD any better than popular well-known brands like Refresh, Celluvisc?
So Retain MGD is a lipid drop. It's like a suspension. Um, yeah, there's kind of different categories of drops. So it's really hard to address a question of, is it better? It's different. Not everybody needs or wants the lipid component. The big picture on drops is, to me, you know how I talked about ocular surface disease and ocular surface pain and clinical signs versus symptoms. I think one thing I didn't explain back then was, when it comes to eye drops, lubricant eye drops, these are addressing both issues, right? And sometimes we're not really clear about which one. So is it about our eyes actually being dry, as in there is a threat to the cornea because our eyes are too dry and it may cause harm, in which case we've got to have the lubrication? Or is it about managing comfort in our eyes? And when they feel dry, or they feel this way, that way, or the other way, we want to put something on them to make them feel better. And drops do play both of those roles. We don't all need both of those roles necessarily, but they do that. So to me, the difference between eye drops, I think of them in those two worlds. Medically, what's the difference? If something has a lipid or an oil component to it, can that theoretically help supplement when you don't have enough oil in your tears? Well, that's the whole premise of oil-based drops for sure. So there's Retain MGD. There's what's the one, Scopes one, Optea's MGD is a kind of newer one on the market like that. I think there's one or two others that have at least a little bit of oil in them. There's sodium hyaluronate drops. There's the like carboxymethylcellulose ones. There's a lot of different types of ingredients that may be in them. And for many of us, it comes down to, what do we tolerate better, or what's longer lasting? I think of the hyaluronate ones as longer lasting and better for the cornea. But we have to find that balance of what's technically going to work best and what's going to feel best. Because honestly, I'm not going to be motivated to use a drop if it doesn't feel good when it's an over-the-counter one. And there's no predicting what's going to feel good to whom.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, we have been going, Rebecca, an hour and a half. How are you feeling? We have some questions left that I could get written up, and you could write the answers that I could put them in our next newsletter, or we could continue on for just a little bit longer. What is your preference?
I'm quite happy to go on if you are.
Okay. Okay. When my eye tears up, it's a burning sensation. What should I do?
Two pieces to that question again. Are we talking about disease? Or are we talking about pain, right? The burning sensation is the pain. So what can you do to make that more comfortable in an immediate sense? There, we got to probably figure out which drops are going to be the most comforting to that. Or if drops aren't agreeable, then again, the moisture chamber glasses tend to be pretty helpful actually with burning. But the big question is, what's causing this? What's the medical part of it that needs to be addressed? Because the treatment side really has to follow diagnosis. You don't know what to do about something unless you know what's wrong. So to improve comfort, all the things that we talked about earlier, the moisture chamber glasses, the drops, the improved humidity, depending what environment you are, just the environmental controls, and the daily care for the eyes. Everything beyond that on the medical side is going to depend on the diagnosis. So burning, boy, is associated with so many different things. For some people, that's neuropathic corneal pain. That has a whole different direction. For some people, that's from blepharitis that needs to be gotten under control, but it's all going to come back to diagnosis.
Okay. My ophthalmologist inserted an acellular allograft amniotic membrane in an eye where the cornea had sustained damage from severe dry eye, and it helped in cornea repair and really reduced dry eye symptoms for over a month. Do you recommend regular monthly use of the membrane?
Well, it's a medical treatment, and I can't recommend those because I'm not a doctor. I do know, I mean, for people with like a non-healing cornea or persistent epithelial defects and things like that, I think that the amniotic membrane treatments are getting used more and more. And I think that's great. If that's what's working and that's what the doctor's recommending, then yes, I'd be curious if that's, all about getting it healed up, or if it's helping manage comfort as well. Sometimes those things that are promoting healing, if they're also causing comfort, bringing more comfort, then we want to keep using them. And doctors might push back if they're not seeing a therapeutic role for it on an ongoing basis. But if it's safe, if they consider it safe and we want it because it's helping us feel better, that's a legitimate thing to ask for.
Okay. Can you speak about the mental health support group meetings that are offered online through the Dry Eye Foundation? Also, what are your thoughts regarding options to work with a therapist, mental health professional, or for severe symptoms such as clinical anxiety and or depression?
Right. So support groups. So we've got several types of Zoom groups. Our regular dry eye group, I think, meets this afternoon at 3 Pacific. Actually, that's twice a month. And then we do have a mental health and dry eye support group that also meets twice a month. It's a small group of people, and I'm not sure what to share about it, except that's like my favorite group ever. But there was somebody else on our board who was managing that group, and then her work got too busy for a time. She went into her busy season, and I took it over just because there was no one else to do it. And then I got hooked. I'm like, I don't want to let go of it. I just love it. I learned things from it so much. Just a really neat group of people, just sharing strategies. I mean, I don't know, we share book suggestions. We talk about strategies for managing anxiety during the day, stuff about relationships. There's all sorts of things that we get into there. But I would say there's people in that group that just have a lot more expertise than I do. I just sit back and watch for the most part. Then in terms of therapists, mental health professionals, I think that it's really smart to make use of the professionals that are available to us. It can be tricky getting going. It can be very difficult to explain what's going on well to sometimes to mental health professionals, just as it is to other health professionals. There again, I would try to avoid the words dry eye when you first get going, because it just brings so many preconceptions that are not accurate. You want to focus on the ocular surface pain aspect and on your experience of navigating the medical world. There are therapists that specialize in people with different types of medical conditions or disabilities related to medical conditions they're struggling with. So sometimes you can find somebody with a narrow enough professional focus that they can be particularly helpful. I think there's people that have a fair amount of trauma from their experiences with eye doctors about dry eye, and getting help from professionals about the trauma aspects of that, I think, can be invaluable. Did I actually answer the question? I don't know if it was. Sorry, sometimes I forget the second half of the question by the time I stop babbling.
Back to the OcuSoft self-question, the ingredient list shows sodium trideceph sulfate.
I see that in regular OcuSoft. I do not see that in OcuSoft Lid Scrub Plus. I see it in some other brands. It's in, a few of those. Let's see. The other one would be the Platinum. So if you wanted to stick with the OcuSoft brand, I think I might want to double check this just to make sure the list I'm looking at is complete, because sometimes these ingredients are not listed with every word in them, right? So I'd like to come back to that. If I can get back to them by email, I'll pin that down.
Okay. Is there a pair of glasses or goggles you'd recommend for people who are dry eye, light sensitive when driving?
It's tough because with driving, you've got to have that balance between getting the protection and staying safe, because I mean, like, I've drove for a really long time with a pair of Wiley X glasses. They were like a large men's style. They wrapped pretty far around, so I didn't feel like my side vision was obscured too much. It's going to depend on the fit and your comfort level with that. So something like that, the Wiley X or the 7i Air Shields that have those foam shields, I wouldn't be as comfortable in the 7i Air Shields driving because those foam shields are so deep. The Wiley X ones are shallower. So if you get like a good polarized type lens and you've got the shield and you've got a style that's fitting well to your face, then you shouldn't be getting much, if any, light in there. I mean, probably your best bet is with Wiley X, they're pretty widely distributed. If you get to like a Harley Davidson dealership, they often stock them, or check out the locator on the wileyx.com website. If you can get someplace where you can try on several styles and get something that's really close fitting. Otherwise, if you're doing it online, it's just such a pain sending stuff back and forth and trying a little bit of guesswork on the fits.
Okay. But are there studies that say omega, I guess, omega helps dry eye? Is probably.
Yep. Oh, there's a million small ones on, I mean, PubMed. Yep.
Okay. And do you recommend eye vitamins, Vision Alive Max, Australian vitamin mentioned by Charlene? Monica was in a support group meeting I had either earlier this week or last week. And I had just had a counseling chat with a gentleman in Australia who had, by his description, he had raging dry eye. And then he started taking Lacrotec. Are you familiar with Lacrotec?
Nope.
Okay, Lacrotec. And he says, I've been on it for 2 months and now I have zero dry eye problem at all. And so I contacted the Lacrotec company, and they do not and will not ship to the United States. So one lady suggested, well, maybe if you could make a friend in Australia, we could send it to them and they could send it to you. But it's got some kind of omega oils and everything. But literally, this man went from suffering to nothing.
That's great. You never know how to understand those stories sometimes, because it's like, wow, I mean, I wish we could all experience that. There's any number of things out there where I know a person where this is what changed their life. This was their magic bullet. And I'm just so happy for them when that happens. Mm-hmm. Trying to replicate it for other people, I don't know, that's hard. I'm just looking at Lacrotec, and yeah, I see flaxseed oil and barrage oil. And I mean, so I don't know. I mean, there are many proprietary omega-3 brands. In the US, you've got things like Hydro Eye and PRN, and these come highly recommended from many doctors. I don't know how to comment on any individual brands. Okay. Sometimes it's just down to experimenting.
Pain measure, SUDS, subjective units of distress scale. That's, you were saying, I don't remember the name of the pain measurement.
Oh, the pain scale. I think that's what I was. Yep. That was the word that was escaping me. Yeah, thanks.
What I will do, this is a question for those of you who cannot see the chat. I'm going to preserve the chat, and then I'm going to post it on our website with this video when this video is edited. And that way it will be another link that you can look up and see how everything is spelled and all of the things that she was talking about. Okay. And and for those of you who are watching this on video, look to the link to the side.
I'm quite happy to put together a resource list to accompany this. I'm going to post that on the website with both links and just names of things. Yeah.
I don't know why it's saying chat is disabled. I don't know what else to do to able it. Let's see. The rest are all about chat is disabled. Okay. So, one last question. Does Botox work for blinking caused by dry eye?
If the blinking is caused by dry eye, I mean, Botox isn't gonna independently alter the dry eye. Depends what we mean by dry eye. Again, that's a big bucket. What's going on there that we're really trying to treat? I think got to have more information. What does dry eye mean in that context?
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. That's the last that we made it all the way through the questions. Yay. I have just a couple more things. I really want to thank you, Rebecca. I think this has been one of our best webinars ever.
Oh,
so I just have a few more things I just want to share. Coming soon, the 2023 BEBRF Symposium this year is going to be in St. Louis with Dr. John Holds as the program director. So I will be announcing the date probably next week, and the venue. So keep your calendars open for that for later this year. And then finally, don't forget, your donations make programs like this possible. So keep us in mind when you're making your charitable donations. Thank you all very, very much for attending today. And this will be posted up on our website as soon as it's edited. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you, Charlene. Bye, everybody.
Bye.